Hello, my name is Stephen. I grew up in an ordinary family. My father was a farmer, and my mother worked as a teacher at the local school. My parents always taught me only good things. VDJJ, we had a strong and close-knit family. The town where I grew up was small and everyone knew each other well. When I turned 21, my childhood home became too small for my youthful ambitions, and I was forced to move to a more populous city. Thus, I found myself in Centville. Here, I rented a small house for living, found a job, and made new acquaintances. Interestingly, several new friends also turned out to be from my hometown. Life began to play with new colors, and I felt that I was in the right place at the right time. A year had passed since I left my parental home. Therefore, I decided to throw a party, to mark the date of my independent and adult life, so to speak. I invited all my friends, prepared snacks, alcohol, and entertainment. I was glad that everyone could come, and it added to the joy of the celebration. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, and I went to open it, as I was expecting a delayed pizza delivery. When I opened the door, there stood a petite green-eyed girl with long eyelashes and dark hair. She looked a bit lost. "Is this St. Patrick's Street 8? "Yes," I replied. "I hope you haven't eaten all the pizza while delivering it." Laughter from my friends and sarcastic comments towards the late courier followed behind me. "Pizza?" the girl asked, confused. "I don't understand what you're—" She looked even more perplexed, and her eyes seemed to become even greener. "Well, yes. We've been waiting for you for 2 whole hours. The alcohol's been drunk, and the snack is late," I said with a smirk. "Sorry, I must have written down the address wrong. My friend recently moved to this city and invited me over. And I apparently didn't hear the correct address, and now I'm here. Plus, my phone just had to die, so I can't even call her to ask what street she lives on. Sorry for disturbing you, I guess I'll go," she said with a sense of despair in her voice. I felt sorry for her, and out of the kindness of my heart, decided to invite her in. That's how I met Kartin. We started dating, and over time she suggested I move in with her since she had been living in this city for a long time. Kartin had a wonderful son, Ben, and a lovely cozy home. We even symbolically exchanged rings without registering our union, as we did not have the money for a wedding ceremony. But despite the lack of an official document, I still felt us as a family. One day, happiness was overshadowed by my father's illness, and I was forced to leave my beloved every 2 weeks to visit my parents. After several months of these travels, friends began to tell strange things about Kartin. Supposedly, in my absence, she stayed overnight at the homes of barely known men, leaving the child alone, sat late in local bars sipping alcohol, and took out loans for small amounts. This was unlike her, and I did not believe my friends, attributing it to plain envy. I even argued with some of them and ended the friendships. And so, returning home once again, I was in excellent spirits, anticipating seeing those beloved green eyes again. But when I opened the door, I was stunned. A huge bald man with tattoos greeted me on the threshold. At first I thought I was too tired and had mistaken the house. But no. Following the man, Ben ran out and, hugging him tightly, said, "Dad, let's go assemble the puzzles further." I was dumbfounded. "Who are you?" the man thundered in a deep voice. I'm Stephen. I live here. Who are you, and what are you doing in my house?" The formidable man with tattoos laughed loudly. "You live here? Seems like the sun has baked your brain, if you can claim that." And he laughed again, throwing his head back and slapping his stomach. I was disconcerted and had no idea what to do next. Words lumped in my throat, and thoughts would not line up in order, buzzing around like annoying flies. But I still managed to compose myself. "Maybe you will let me in, and we can figure out what's happening." "Well, go ahead. You've made me laugh good. Come in, you'll tell more funny stories. It's all the same in prison." And with his large tattooed hand, he gestured inside the house. We went into the living room. I sat in a chair, and he sat on the couch, putting his feet on the coffee table. "My name is Mike, and I live here." Mike emphasized the word "I," making it clear that he was the owner here. "Hey kid, bring me a beer quickly before it completely freezes. You don't want your dear daddy to get a sore throat, do you?" Mike yelled, winking at me maliciously. "A good conversation can't do without beer. That's if you want it to be good," he said maliciously, and handed me a frosty can. "So Stefan, or whatever your name is." Tell me, how long have you lived here and how do you know Kartin? Aggression was evident in his voice. I explained everything as it was. To prove my point, I showed the keys to the house and took out copies of my documents from the dresser. Well, I believe you, I believe. Kartin is quite the piece of work. And his hand clenched into a fist, so tightly that the tin can crumpled in his palm like a thin sheet of paper. But to snag someone as sophisticated as you, I'm not much for talking and don't know the stories. With those words, Mike went to the kitchen. He rummaged through drawers and opened cupboard doors for a long time. I could hear indistinct muttering and cursing. After a few minutes, Mike returned and placed a slightly crumpled sheet in front of me, bearing the marks of coffee cups. "Read!" He barked and jabbed his meaty finger at the paper. "Marriage certificate, Mike Baker and Kartin Wilson." There was no point in reading further. Everything was clearer than clear. Mike stood waiting for my next move. "I'll go get my things," I said, suddenly rising from the chair. "I have nothing more to do here." Mike nodded in approval. "I won't stand in your way. You have as much time as you need." He turned around, took out a pack of cigarettes, and went outside. When all my things were packed in the suitcase, I decided it would be nice to take a break after such shocking news, and there was still plenty of time until my next trip to my parents. So I bought a ticket and headed to the airport. The bright sun greeted me as I disembarked from the plane, and the rich sea air tried to dispel my melancholy, airing out my head from sad thoughts. As I walked to the hotel, I didn't even notice how my dejected state began to leave me, replaced instead by a sense of lightness and adventure. Evening was approaching, and I decided that instead of moping alone in an empty hotel room, it would be great to go out and have some fun. After leaving my things, I headed to a bar located right on the hotel premises. There weren't too many people there. Soft music played. Some talked, some danced. I sat at the farthest table. A magnificent view of the sunset slowly sinking into the sea opened up before me. Absorbed in my thoughts, I didn't notice a girl detach from the crowd of dancers and approach me. She had beautiful tanned skin and wore a light blue dress. "Why so gloomy and so pale? Are you sick?" she asked cheerfully. "No, I've just arrived and haven't had the chance to tan yet." She sat next to me, boldly taking the glass from which I had been drinking and took a sip of the remaining alcohol through a straw. "It's good that you're healthy. I think your bluish skin will match my dress perfectly." And taking my hand, she tried to lead me to the dance floor. "Sorry, miss, I'm not really up for it right now." And I gently pushed her hand aside. "Well, as you wish," the stranger said with a slight irritation in her voice, and without taking her eyes off me, went back to the other dancers. For some reason I liked her, and continued to watch the silhouette in the blue dress, which moved smoothly to the rhythm of the melody among the other dancers. Suddenly, slow music began to play. A guy as tanned as she was approached her, clearly intending to ask her to dance. For some reason at that moment, I thought that he looked absolutely ridiculous next to her, and that I would look much better with her in a dance. So I stood up and approached them decisively. "Actually, she's with me," I said sharply, and embraced her around the waist. The guy, shrugging his shoulders, disappeared into the crowd of people moving to the piano accompaniment. "You're quite bold," she noted. "By the way, I'm Rachel." "Nice to meet you. I'm Steve." And we began to dance together to the beat of the music. Her skin was firm and soft to the touch. She smelled of salty sea and flowers, and her sense of rhythm was impeccable. I hugged her tighter around her slender waist and pulled her closer. Her lips were so close to mine that I couldn't resist the temptation. We merged in a passionate kiss. It lasted so long that we didn't notice the pianist finishing his piece, and people began to disperse to their rooms. Rachel and I stood alone in the middle of an absolutely empty dance floor, oblivious to the tired hotel staff casting displeased looks at us as they cleared the tables of food and drinks. Suddenly, Rachel looked at me attentively. "We're alone here," I noted, stating the obvious. "Maybe—" and suddenly I hesitated. Conflicting thoughts collided in my head. On one hand, I wanted to give in to instincts and spend the night with her, but on the other hand, I wasn't sure it was the right thing to do, and thought that maybe she would turn out to be just like Kartin. But brushing all doubts aside, I said, "Maybe we could continue this wonderful evening in my room." Rachel smiled and nodded in approval. In the room, I took out a small bottle of wine, cookies, chocolate from the fridge, and placed it all on the table. "Well, we should drink to our acquaintance," I said as I opened the drink, and the cork popped out of the bottleneck with a pop. "We don't have much in the way of snacks, but we make do with what we have." I gestured broadly. Rachel laughed. She pulled the glasses I had found in the room towards her and evenly poured the wine into them. Then she sat on the fluffy carpet, and I sat next to her. We sat in silence, enjoying the view from the large panoramic window, feeling as if we had known each other for a very long time. When the wine was finished, she turned and placed her palm on my cheek. I embraced her shoulders, and we merged in a passionate kiss again. Her scent and lips drove me crazy. I carefully removed her dress and gently laid her on the carpet. My lips touched her cheeks, neck. I showered her firm chest and flat stomach with kisses. We spent an unforgettable night. When I woke up, she was already gone. Figures, I thought. This was to be expected. And I started to make the bed. But when I lifted the blanket, I saw a small bloodstain on the sheet. It felt like an electric shock ran through me from head to toe. I immediately dressed and ran to the reception as fast as I could. "Please," I gasped. "The dark-haired girl named Rachel. In what room was she?" The time it took for the administrator to find the information seemed like an eternity. "She checked out this afternoon," I heard in reply. "Thank you," I replied detachedly and went back to my room. My mood, just like my vacation, was completely ruined, and I decided, in light of recent events, it would be better to return to my parents. Although I didn't want to dampen their spirits with my somber demeanor, I saw no other option. So I took my still unpacked suitcase, informed the administrator that I was ending my stay early, paid the fine, and headed to the airport. Back in my hometown, the weather greeted me with cold gusts of wind and dark, heavy clouds that occasionally drizzled rain. By the time I reached my parents' house, I was soaked and cold. My mother joyfully greeted me at the doorstep but was surprised at my early return and sad face. "What happened, son?" "Everything's fine, just awful weather, and I'm tired from the trip," I replied, trying to hide my true emotions. "Come in quickly. Don't freeze. I'll make you some herbal tea and warm up. And in the meantime, go change and sit down at the table. We were just about to have lunch with your father." I put on clean, dry clothes and sat on the sturdy oak chair next to my father. "Well, tell me what's new you've seen," said my father, and coughed heavily. Sweat broke out on his forehead, and he wiped it away with his shirt sleeve. "Nothing new. Work, home, boredom. So I decided to take a vacation and stay with you and Mom." "Yes, even a horse needs a break," said my father, and loudly blew his nose into a handkerchief. "As you can see, I'm getting better. A little more and I'll be as good as new," said my father and laughed. "It's good that you came to us. Now grab a spoon, see? Mother is already giving us the look. Be careful, or she'll hit you on the forehead with that spoon for letting the roast cool off for nothing." And we all started the meal together. I had no appetite at all, but I still ate to avoid getting my parents started on detailed inquiries about my absence. After finishing, I washed my plate, thanked for the delicious food, and went to my room. 2 weeks passed. Thoughts of Rachel wouldn't leave me in peace. I walked around gloomier than a cloud, and my parents started to worry if I had fallen ill. I had to tell them everything, down to the smallest detail, about Kartin's husband, whom she had hidden from me, about meeting Rachel, and about the bloodstain on the sheet. "And you kept quiet?" yelled my father, his shiny bald head turning red. "Loneliness is not the worst thing during trials. The worst thing is to sit idly by." "Yes, son, maybe you should try to find her." My mother supported my father's words. "But I don't know what to do. She didn't leave any contacts." "Then think of something. Didn't we teach you to find a way out of difficult situations? Don't you dare come back here without her," my father added, and slammed his fist on the table. And then I had an idea. I went to the airport to return to the hotel where we had met. Upon arriving at the hotel, I rushed to the reception desk, where the same administrator as last time greeted me. "Good afternoon," she greeted me. "Good afternoon. Do you remember me? I canceled my reserved room a day after checking in. I also asked you about a girl named Rachel. You told me she checked out of the hotel after noon?" My thoughts were jumbled, and I couldn't gather them together due to nervousness. Yes, I remember. At what exactly time did she check out? Did she take a shuttle? Let me check. She checked out at 12:20 and our driver took her to the bus station. Can I speak to this driver? I asked impatiently. Of course. I'll call him now if he's available. After talking to the driver, I rushed towards the bus station. Arriving at the information desk, I began to explain the situation to the woman sitting there in a disjointed manner. She looked at me as if I were insane, but still began to search the records of sold tickets. I was in luck. That day, only one girl named Rachel had bought a ticket for a bus that went from the bus station to the final stop without any stops. I wrote down the surname and city she was headed to on a found burger wrapper, bought a ticket, and ran to the bus that was about to leave. The journey was long. I even managed to fall asleep. A gray-haired curly woman in a funny colorful cap with a basket woke me up. "Get up! This is the final station," she said, tugging at my shoulder. I got off. It was getting dark, and there were no people on the streets. Only this woman at the stop was searching for something in her basket. "Excuse me, do you know where Rachel Brooks lives?" I asked her hopefully. "Of course," the old lady replied. "Go straight ahead, then turn left onto Fremont Street. Her house is at the end in the center of the street." "Thank you!" I shouted, moving away from the old lady. I ran through the unfamiliar city, my heart pounding out of my chest and the wind whistling in my ears. On the deserted streets, the echo of my running bounced off the houses. Dogs barked at me, and lights turned on in the houses ahead. Even a man came out onto his porch and yelled after me to stop running like a madman since people were trying to rest. And shaking his fist, he disappeared into the dark entrance of his house. After what seemed like an eternity, I stood in front of the right door, very afraid that I might have been given the wrong information and that the door would be opened by someone other than the Rachel I was looking for. But I decided to take the risk. For some reason, rummaging through my pockets, in the chest pocket of my jacket, I found a ring with a large opal that my father had given to my mother as a token of eternal love when she gave birth to me. Apparently, my parents had secretly slipped it to me before my trip in search of Rachel. With a trembling hand, I pressed the doorbell. Silence. I pressed it again, this time holding my finger on the button for a long time. There wasn't even the sound of footsteps behind the door. I looked at the windows and realized that none of them had lights on. What an idiot, I thought. Just wasted my strength and nerves for nothing. It wasn't worth it, considering the chances of finding her across our vast country were so slim. I took out the burger wrapper with the surname and city name written on it, about to throw it away, when the door opened. On the doorstep stood my beloved Rachel. Her hands were dirty with soil. In her right hand she held a small juniper bush, and in the other, a small gardening trowel. Her hair was pulled back, but one unruly strand had escaped from the bun and was falling across her forehead, bothering her. Rachel, closing her eyes, adjusted the lock and said, "Sorry, I didn't hear you ringing because I was in the backyard. Can I help you with something?" At that moment, I took out the ring, placed it in the burger box, and got down on one knee. "Marry me," I whispered with a trembling voice. Rachel's eyes widened in surprise, and she dropped the juniper bush and trowel, which clanged against the ground and bounced away. "Stephen, what are you doing here?" "Rachel, I'm so happy I found you. Will you be my wife?" I repeated. "Of course, yes," she replied, and we embraced each other tightly.